So once again, thank you, everyone. This is Tiffany Spear with the City of Lakewood. I am here along with Ted Thielen, the program coordinator with me on the 2024 periodic update for Lakewood. And then we also have with us Dave Buer, the Community Economic Development Director for Lakewood. And we have Burke Consulting here represented by Ben Hahn online, and then Andrew Bjorn here in person, and Adam, I'm sorry, I don't know your last name. Adam Greer, thank you, also with Burke. What I'm going to do today is walk us through a slideshow that basically summarizes what the city has to do and also identifies what we hope to be able to work with each of your respective agencies or governments, our districts for. We are working on a timeline of about 18 months from now to be completely done. But what that means is within about 11 months, even less than that, actually, we're going to start the legislative process with Lakewood's Planning Commission. So with that, I'm going to start sharing my screen. There we go. All right. So again, why are we here today? This is why we're here. So there are two ways that the Lakewood City website and kind of outward facing social media right now are live regarding the 24 process. We have, first of all, on our own website, a page dedicated to the 2024 periodic review. And we also have what's called lakewoodwaspeaks.org. And this is an website that is going to do a couple of things. First, it's going to somewhat mirror what's on the city's own page for this, but it's also a way where we're going to be collecting public comment basically all the time through the time when we start our formal public hearings next spring. So that is live now. You're welcome to check it out. But what people can do there is see recordings and meeting materials for what's been happening actually since last September, and also provide us with public comment that comes through to me automatically once they're submitted. And so we've let people know that that's there, and we're going to ramp up all of our outreach here within the next month or so, not only through these ways to do it, but also through other city communications. All of these on the slides, by the way, are going to be live links. So if you get these later today or on Monday, you'll be able to go directly to these things. The Planning Commission, as I mentioned last September, began a series of discussions on topics that are incorporated into the big 2024 periodic review. And you can go again to the website and watch any and all of those recordings and access their meeting materials should you want to. And there's also been, since January of this year, a series of meetings that the City Council has held, study sessions. And again, you can access those recordings and meeting materials if you would like. So what the heck is the 2024 periodic review? As you may know, the City of Lakewood already does annual updates to its comprehensive plan. We actually just completed the 2023 process, and yesterday those changes went into effect. And basically what that annual process does is ask for either from the City Council or city staff, and then also the public, for changes that they would like to see made. Sometimes it's a state law change, sometimes it's a rezone request from a private party, sometimes it's a policy change that the City Council directs. The periodic review is much more robust than that. It is required under state law to touch every piece of a comprehensive plan, which, as you may know, has a number of elements within it, everything from parks and rec to public safety to land use. And what we are doing is opening, again, all of those elements for an update based on changes to law, changes to policy, and anything else that the council directs the city to take a look at. We in Lakewood are part of the Puget Sound region, and so we have a couple of other layers to address in our consistency or our update to our comprehensive plan. First is state law, which is the Growth Management Act. But then there's also the multi-county planning policies that came out of the Puget Sound Regional Council. That incorporates Pierce, King, Snohomish, and Kitsap counties. And then within those documents that come out of the PSRC, there is what's called the Regional Growth Strategy. And that is intended to be a coordinated effort for all of the counties and its cities within those 4 counties on how they grow, how they plan for transportation, and other impacts. And then there's the Pierce County countywide planning policies. So within the county itself and its 23 cities, looking for consistency and some common themes, common elements, common requirements within all of our comprehensive plans and regulations. Once we get done with this, which is due to be completely finished and certified by the Department of Commerce and Puget Sound Regional Council by the end of next year, there will be a 5-year check-in, which is now going to be required for these processes that will then be due in 2029. There is, in addition to the mandatory by state law required elements that our comprehensive plan has here in Lakewood, some optional elements. So things that you're allowed to do if you want to. And so, for instance, for us in Lakewood, we have 3 sub-area plans, and we'll talk in more detail about those in a moment. But basically, it is a section of the city, not the full city, that has its own vision, if you will. It has its own policies. It has its own prioritization of use of infrastructure funding, and it has its own, in a couple of cases, development regulations. So those are also going to be part of this update. Oops. There we go. So the schedule, by next May, that is our real drop dead date for what I'm asking all of you to help assist us on right now. We will be coming to our Planning Commission and starting the formal legislative review. And so Planning Commission will hold a series of study sessions, hold a public hearing. And at this point, they begin that on May 1st, and then they complete their action with a recommendation to the City Council on June 26th. The City Council then picks it up. And at this point, this is a very aggressive schedule for them. It may well change, but as it stands, July 1st, they would begin the review and they would be taking action on the package on July 22nd. Part of the reason for that timing is because they will be engaged in a biennial budget review soon thereafter, but it's also to give time for Commerce and the Puget Sound Regional Council to do its review of the product that Lakewood develops. So here's where all of you come in. First of all, I will ask that you just take a moment to look at this slide, see who's here on the list. And if you happen to know that we are missing an agency, a special district, a community partner, anybody else that you don't see on this, please contact me after the fact through email or phone. Just let me know if we've dropped a ball and missed somebody on this list. But what we tried to incorporate are tribal connections, the utilities, special districts, the educational partners we have with Lakewood, other agencies, other government partners, and then the community partners as well. So again, if you find here that there's a glaring mistake, please let me know that after the fact. So what we're looking to do, hopefully with the various groups that are invited here today and anyone who weren't able to make it, under the state law, there's now a requirement for tribal participation. And so there needs to be a memorandum of agreement regarding how the planning process will work, and then invitation to those tribes to participate should they wish to in the comprehensive plan process. Lakewood has connections and relationships with both the Nisqually tribe and then less so, but we do with the Puyallups as well. And so we're hoping to keep that going and maybe strengthen those as part of this process. We need to also be coordinating with plans of adjacent jurisdictions. So in Lakewood's case, that would be Tacoma, University Place, Fircrest, Pierce County, Steilacoom, and then maybe a little further south, DuPont, and on down the line. So we will be working with other local governments as well. And then again, under state law, there is a requirement that at the very least, local governments planning and land designations and uses do not make the operations of a military installation more difficult, to put it kind of roughly. But the idea is employing 100 more personnel. Obviously, the Joint Base Lewis McChord immediately adjacent to Lakewood is significantly larger than that. I think right now we're at about 40,000 service members there. But making sure that what we are planning is in coordination with them and we are not creating a situation where they are unable to operate their needed things. And then we have service providers, so utility capacity, special districts, and community partners expertise. Utilities, as those of you that are from those utilities well know, Lakewood does not own its sewer, water, power, utilities. And so we are working with all of you and asking for your assistance here. Special districts, fire, as well as our own police department, and then the community partners related to affordable housing needs, human service needs, veterans needs, etc. We're trying to get information from all of you as we move forward into this process. So capital facilities, and this may be where we're asking for the most concrete bunches of information or plans from the various applicable groups or agencies. Water, sanitary sewer, stormwater, schools, parks, police and fire, transportation, including WashDOT, and then the utilities are all included in capital facilities. And so what we need to include in our comprehensive plan is an inventory of the existing capital facilities owned by all entities, and then a forecast of the capital facilities over the planning period. And for this planning period, it is through 2044. And then the proposed locations and capacities of expanded or new facilities owned by the city. And then a 6-year plan for financing capital facilities. And then if there are failing septic systems, polluting waters of the state, that is a corrective action item that we need to incorporate as well. One thing to note for everybody here today is that with some recent changes that I'll go over shortly regarding specifically housing density, there's going to be some significant changes to anticipated need for water, sewer, and power potentially within different areas of Lakewood. But it also does affect the schools, the fire district, and others. And capital facilities don't have to just be those that support development. So if there are other capital facilities that people want to be incorporating into this plan, this update, we can certainly do that. Related to transportation, we are needing to do some intergovernmental coordination here as well. So looking at the transportation plan and land use assumptions and making sure that they are still up to date and consistent with regional transportation planning. Taking a look at parking, and this is a big issue in the city of Lakewood, given current land use patterns, but also with these new changes to the requirement for more housing, not only per acre, but more housing units per lot. And how does that affect the current parking availability and future road system needs? Looking at adopted levels of service and looking at transportation demand management strategies as well. For utilities, general location, proposed locations and capacity, provisions for protection of groundwater, and protection the functions and values of critical aquifer recharge areas is also one of the things that's needed. In terms of land use, making sure that we have sufficient land identified for schools, utility corridors, transportation corridors, and other things as listed here. Identifying open space corridors, looking at protecting critical areas, looking at citing essential public facilities, and then written findings to approve subdivisions providing adequacy of public facilities, including that list there. So just verifying that our mapping, our zoning, and our regulations all provide for all these needed facilities and uses within city boundaries. So starting to get into some of the Lakewood specific information that's underlying all of these requests. 2020 census results are here for the city of Lakewood, and there's a couple of points to make here about information figured out since the 2020 census. So first of all, the population about 63,600. White alone was actually a minority. And then you have also there the employment percentage, the households, the housing units, education level, and then whether there was health care available for those individuals or not at the time. One thing to note, though, is as of March of 2022, the census group, or the U.S. Census Department, I guess, decided or figured out that the categories and the way they counted Hispanic and Latinx population in the census was somewhat flawed. And so there are undercounts estimated for Black or African American, American Indian or Alaska Native, some other race, and Hispanic or Latino, and an overcounted estimation for white, non-Hispanic, white alone, and Asian. So while this document here is showing you 49.1% out of the 2020 census, that number is likely lower for white alone population in Lakewood. Some of you know this, some may not, but this is the Washington Health Equity something map. It turns into HEAL as the acronym. But what you see here for the city of Lakewood, if you go over to the ranking, is that we have the most of our city, except for this one tract here, is basically 7, 8, 9, or 10 in terms of environmental health disparities, meaning there's a problem, a need for improvement. But this is the overall analysis that includes environmental exposures, environmental effects, socioeconomic factors, and sensitive populations. What you see here is specifically the socioeconomic factors within Lakewood. And those of you who work in Lakewood all the time, probably this is no surprise. But the factors that went into this mapping are listed here. It's language, education, race, ethnicity, transportation, and housing cost. And basically Tillicum, Woodbrook, Springbrook, Lakeview, a little bit of the downtown, the Monte Vista area over on the east side of the city. And then some of this is Oakbrook. And then this is, I think, part of Oakbrook as well, but a different demographic, obviously, are in the higher needs, higher disparity problems. Whereas the west central side of the city, where there's the Lake District, I'll call it that. And then some of this is because there's somewhat less residential development, for instance, with Fort Steilacoom Park. But this area of the city overall has a lower risk or problem with these socioeconomic factors. The future land use map for Lakewood is shown here. And we mentioned some sub areas that are incorporated into this review. The downtown sub area was adopted in 2018. The Lakewood Station District sub area plan was adopted in 2021. And then down here, there is actually a Tillicum neighborhood sub area plan, which was created way back in 2011. And that's going to undergo a significant update as part of the 24 process. But we're also going to be doing a review of the downtown and the Station District sub areas as well, in part because those two sub areas were identified originally as where much of the city's new housing was going to come. And with the new changes to state law, we're also actually going to need to look at all of these other yellow areas in the city for some significant housing planning changes and infrastructure planning and changes as a result. These are the zones where residential uses are allowed. So again, the yellow is basically the single family historical areas of the city. The lighter and darker brown are multifamily. The red is commercial or mixed use zones. So all of these areas, again, may be affected by what we're going to be doing in response to some state law changes that were adopted in 21, 22, and 23. In terms of where we have capacity for growth between now and 2044, you will see that we do have some vacant parcels in various zones across the city, but the most active area in terms of future development is going to be on what are called underutilized parcels, meaning areas that are used in some way, but not to their highest and best use, or not to the most density that's allowed within the zone that they have. And so what we're going to need to do in terms of the next comprehensive plan update is take a look at this, and for a couple of different reasons. One is it realistic to try to put all of this growth that we need to plan for in underutilized parcels? Do we need to rezone potentially some places in order to have additional capacity? Do we need to look at allowed uses on these various parcels to see if we can hit these numbers that we're supposed to hit over the next 20 years, particularly with residential development? So again, the sub areas I just mentioned, downtown, Lakewood Station, and then Tillicum. Tillicum is a plan that's been in place for a long time, and much of its focus when it was adopted in 2011 was to deal with the fact that it was somewhat isolated from the rest of the city. It is a lower income area. It's more racially diverse. And at the time, Woodbrook was in somewhat of the same situation. Since then, Woodbrook has had some significant rezoning and redevelopment for industrial use, but there is still some residential in the Woodbrook area as well as Tillicum. What has happened with Tillicum, however, recently, as you probably know, is we have two new I-5 corridor interchanges that were just created, which are changing interest and how land use over time may be exploited, and not to use that in a negative way, but just what will happen in the Tillicum area now that those two interchanges are complete. So the 2044 employment targets and housing targets, and how does this affect why all of you are here today? Right now, per again, the 2020 census, we have an estimated 2,699 housing units in the city. That 2,699 is everything from single family detached to an apartment. What you see now, though, is that in 2044, not only is there a number of additional units identified, but we now have the requirement to say so many units for different economic incomes. And so what you see across the top here of this table is either 0 to 30% area median income, 30 to 50, 50 to 80, 80 to 100, and on up. And there's a number of units that the city is supposed to plan for in each one of those income bands. In addition to that, there is now a recognized need to identify emergency housing units as well. If you come down here again to look at the sub-area plan, so this is downtown, this is Lakewood Station, and then this is the rest of the city. What has been currently planned for is in the downtown, about a quarter of all of those housing units were intended to go into our downtown sub-area. About 18% in the Lakewood Station, and then the rest elsewhere in the county. I'm sorry, in the city. For jobs, a large majority, 75%, are supposed to be coming into the downtown, 13% in Lakewood Station, and then about 12% elsewhere in the city. So when these numbers were created, when these sub-area plans were adopted, there was no requirement to look at income band. And so part of what we're going to be doing in our 2044 review of zones, of uses, of the sub-area plans themselves, is seeing what needs to change to be reflective of this new requirement that we plan for a specific number of housing units at different income bands throughout the city. Oops. There's also, because of recent state law, requirements that the city now change what has been traditionally the single family areas on the west side of the city particularly, to allow additional accessory dwelling units and also to allow just more units per lot. And what that would do in turn for police service, for fire service, for water and sewer and road needs, for school planning. This is where a lot of the attention is going to be paid, I think, by the public over the next year. And we'll be asking for your assistance and try to provide you information as you're doing your respective capital facilities planning as well. But this map shows you a couple of different things, so bear with me here. First of all, this line here is a designation separating where under state law you do one level of density, and then there's higher levels of density here in the orange spots, because these areas are closer to transit. So on the yellow side, the west side, there's a requirement, for instance, for 2 units per lot, where traditionally it's been 1. And then also the allowance for accessory dwelling units. Whereas on the other side, in these oranger areas, is up to 4 units per lot because you are closer to transit. However, that is all qualified by the fact that where there are critical areas and critical area buffers, these may not apply. And so the thing that we are doing right now in the city is taking a look at all of these pink and then blue checked areas. These are critical areas and they're buffers. And so they affect where this rule for 2 units per lot or 4 units per lot are going to apply. It obviously affects quite a bit of what would have been an area for a significant increase in density. But there are, again, a lot of areas that are not affected by critical areas. So this will be a big change for the people that live there, the businesses, and again, the capital facilities needs. So what we're trying to do here with you today is to kick off this process to make sure we've got the right partners engaged, We're going to be creating and scheduling steering committee meetings moving forward. And so some of you may be asked and invited, or maybe you just want to attend and participate. We're going to be seeking data and expertise from you and others that we may have missed today to incorporate into the comprehensive plan and regulations. And we're going to be providing updates to you, to the Planning Commission and City Council through this process. And then, as I mentioned on that timeline before, starting May 1st, this goes into formal public review at the Planning Commission. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, but just a reminder, these are the two places to track most easily what we're doing. But I'm going to stop sharing so we can now open this up for any questions, any comments, criticism, whatever you're willing to share, either in the room or online. So thank you for bearing with me through all of that. Open to questions.
Tiffany, this is Christine Rompa from Puget Sound Energy.
Yes.
Two of the slides listed several bullet points of what you need from utilities. When do you need that by? Is this like next year? Is this like sooner the better? Just kind of trying to figure out how to wrap ourselves around providing that in a timely way for you.
Sure. And the answer for everything will probably be sooner the better. Immediately before this meeting, I was talking with our consulting team with Burke, and we're talking about scheduling, planning, and prepping documents for steering committee review and then public review next spring. So if we can be getting information regarding, for instance, capital facilities planning, current infrastructure and planned infrastructure improvements, anything like that, as soon as they are available. And even if it's something where an agency or utility says, we are planning to do this and complete it in 2025, but right now here's our older plan to go off of until then, we would appreciate all of that type of information.
All right, thank you.
Oh, yes, please go ahead. Would you mind coming to the mic? Sorry.
Hi, thanks, Stephanie. I'm Eric Jaziski, Pierce Transit. Yes, so on that same question, or are you planning on sending kind of a list of things you need from the agency, the partners? Okay.
Yes.
That would be very helpful. I am just curious, not sure if you touched on it. Obviously, there was a change in the regional growth strategy with the recent plan update for a transit-focused growth approach. Does Lakewood have plans to adjust how the land use designations are laid out as a result of that? Or I'm just curious sort of what you're looking at in that area.
In terms of land use designations, I think we're going to be keeping where residential is residential and other uses are or stay where they are, but
intensity.
Right, exactly. And so some of what I was showing and walking through, whether the city wants to do it or not, they're going to be asked to take a look at within a quarter or a half-mile distance of transit, the type of uses, the types of densities that are going to have to be allowed. Mm-hmm. The issues in Lakewood, to be perfectly frank with everyone, are going to be parking and where road capacity will be able to support on-street parking, or if the city even wants to go that way. But the other question that's come up is for both Pierce and Sound Transit folks. One of the reasons we have the map that we have right now is because there is a planned telecom stop for the station, for the Sounder. And there's also the potential BRT route for Pierce Transit. But neither one of those are going to be done anytime soon. The one for Sound Transit, for instance, isn't scheduled till 2045. So there's already questions coming from the public and from our city council members about why are we planning for things so far out? And if the funding doesn't ultimately happen, why are we planning when it might not ultimately happen? So that's going to be dialogue with the agencies for sure.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions from anyone?
Tiffany, this is Terry from Pierce County Sewers.
Yes, hello.
I have a question for you. I know that there's a lot of work that your city is going to be doing with the system. Anything that you can help us out with forecasting where the road you think will take this in approximate timelines, if you in like maybe 5-year increments, where you think growth would happen would benefit at least supervision completely, so that we can look at and plan for projects. Without some kind of timeline, it's really difficult for us to try looking at where we can build capacity I mean, we could think that development's happening in one part of the city, then a developer comes in and wants to develop something completely different. And then we've invested capital where it doesn't provide a benefit. Anything you can do to help us with that would be great.
Okay, I didn't catch everything you said, Taryn, so forgive me if I missed something, but I think what you were asking for is information regarding known development and where that would be happening, coupled with where we're planning for this significant increase in density over time. And there is information we can provide to you, to the sewer utility and anyone else about where we know big developments are happening. So for instance, we know there's multiple hundreds of housing units getting developed in the nearer term in the station sub area. But there may be other things over time that we just can't tell you about yet, but we know zoning is going to allow for it. So yes, we will try to get you information. And as this moves forward and the city starts to talk about potentially upzoning areas, we'll keep all of the utilities involved with that. And then if there are specific big projects that we know have started to move forward, we'll keep utilities informed of that as well. I hope that answered your question or request.
That should be.
Any questions from anybody else? Any comments?
Tiffany, it's Christine again with Puget Sound Energy. I'm just curious about your RAISE grant application. Have you guys heard?
We did, and we were not successful. So for those who were wondering, the RAISE grant was for specifically looking at the transportation improvements in order to make our Green Street Loop, which was a vision for our downtown, happen sooner rather than later. That was our first attempt at an application. I assume our city is going to continue applying for that. We are going to have a debrief with those who reviewed the application here. I'm just waiting to hear a date back from them. But I think it's going to be within the month of August or maybe September. So thank you for your help with that. But yeah, we were not successful on our first try.
Oh, that's too bad to hear. Keep going.
We will. Thanks. Last call. Any questions? All right. Again, thank you all so much. This is a lot of brain power and money dedicated to the past 45 minutes or so. So thank you all for your time. I will send out slides as well as this recording link for anyone who may want to access those. And once more, if there's anybody you think should have been invited that you didn't see on that list of different organizations, please let me know. And we will be in touch with next steps. So thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your Friday. Bye-bye.